Hi, I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Reid Duke. Welcome to the draft viewer. We're going to take a look at your draft, Reid, your second draft here. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So, you start with one of the best cards in the format.
Right, yeah, I had Saheeli's Artistry yesterday in a blue-black control deck, and if I had to choose a card other than a Mythic Rare or a Masterpiece to open, Saheeli's Artistry would be very near the top of the list.
It's a great place to start. Pushes you into, heavy blue and a more artifact-centric deck, but you are certainly wide open at this point.
Yep.
Followed up by getting past another great card.
Yeah, another rare. So I was very excited about this. Blue-black control is already, an archetype that I'd done well with yesterday, and one that Saheeli's Artistry makes me think of. So to get another late-game bomb and sort of have that really strong late game locked up already is a great way to start.
Yeah. And then third pick actually just feeds right into this theme.
Yep, Underhanded Designs is not only one of the best removal spells in the format, but also just a great, you could call it an engine card for a black-based artifact deck, and that's where I was headed anyway, so Underhanded Designs. And
then you followed it up with a slight diversion from the course here because there was no card that was just jumping out at you.
Yeah, this is quite a weak pack, but I'm a big fan of splashing in this format, at least keeping the option open to splash. Right. There's a nice intersection of mana fixing that I don't mind playing with anyway, like Aether Hub and Prophetic Prism, and the really powerful gold uncommons that sometimes go later than they should if people aren't in the right color combinations.
Yep. And then you followed it up, and this is one of the more interesting picks because there are certainly two playable blue and black cards. There's Windrake and Lawless Broker, but you actually go a different direction.
Yeah, so I'd say I narrowed this down to either Lawless Broker or Narnam Cobra. The advantage of taking the Lawless Broker is just to cut black a little more and make sure people downstream are not interested in my color. However, having the Underhanded Designs already and wanting more artifacts made me inclined to take the Cobra. Both being cheaper, you can trade off with their Grizzly Bear to keep your life total high, being an artifact, and as I mentioned, having Aether Hub and maybe Prophetic Prism later, you can actually activate the ability sometimes, so not so bad to pick up a 2-drop artifact creature.
Yeah. And then here you could potentially start going in a different direction, especially with Aether Hub and maybe not seeing a lot of blue cards getting passed.
Right, I haven't seen much blue, but Saheeli's Artistry is an extremely powerful card. So I really don't want to give up on either the Marionette Master or the Saheeli's Artistry. So there are basically two ways that I get to play both those cards. The simple one is just drafting blue and black. The not so simple one is drafting a base green deck with lots of mana fixing, like a Tune with the Aether, Wild Wanderer, in addition to the Aether Hub that I already have, maybe Prophetic Prism. So I took a Tune with the Aether here sort of as a backup plan for the worst case scenario where I get cut on one or both of my colors and maybe I can move into green.
Yep. This pack had some more support for your artifact theme, whether it was Eager Construct, Ardar Express, or Malphus Squad. They all kind of provide artifacts. I assume Curio Vendor are not really on the table here.
No, I'd much rather have an artifact 2-drop than the Curio Vendor. So this is similar to the Lawless Broker versus Narnam Cobra pick, where I could take the slightly, maybe more powerful black card, or I could go with the cheaper, more defensive card that fits better with my deck, and that's what I decided to do with the Eager Construct.
Yep. And here you have some other options, the Wild Wanderer to support the green splash, and either Trade Winds or maybe even Weldfast Wingsmith as late blue cards.
Right, yeah, I certainly don't mind having an Aether Trade Winds in my deck, but given that I'd picked the Attune earlier, I decided to stick with that backup plan, so to speak, and take Wild Wanderer.
Yep. And this pick, I assume, kind of pushed you back into blue because you got a pretty nice sign.
Yeah, Malfunction is, in my opinion, one of the strongest blue commons. Not like a fantastic card or anything, but definitely a card that I'm happy to see this late. And since plan A is still to draft that blue-black control deck, I took Malfunction here, even though I would have enjoyed having the Wild Wanderer too.
So after pack one, you have the blue card you first picked and the blue card you ninth picked. Both of which kind of push you into a control role, and then multiple controlling black cards that really want artifacts, plus a couple of artifacts in the Aether Hub. So you are fairly open, even though you're definitely leaning towards blue-black here.
Yeah, some combination of the Sultai colors.
And you open pack two, and you open another pretty decent rare.
Yeah, another blue rare. Now, I was not quite as excited to open Ether Squall Ancient as I normally might have been, since I already had two really powerful expensive cards, and I wasn't really an energy deck.
Yeah.
But the little kid in me still just loves the 6/6 flying, so.
Followed that up with a pack that This is, I think, one of the more interesting picks as well, since Snarethopter is regarded as one of the better uncommons.
Yeah, Snarethopter is by far the strongest card in this pack, but my plan at this point was to win with my 6 and 7 mana cards, and at the point that I'm playing a 4-drop creature, I probably just want to be blocking and trading it off anyway, so a lot of the power of Snarethopter is going to be lost in my deck. Still a great card that I would play with. You know, sometimes you just randomly happen to draw the aggressive half of your deck. But Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot, I think, is a very key card, a key component to the black-based artifact control decks. And I ended up taking that over Snarethopter, which not a pick I would normally make.
Yeah, I think a lot of players would not have made that pick, but I think it worked out better for your deck.
I think so, too.
This pack had a number of good options, but you had to be excited to see a second copy of Underhanded Designs.
At the point that you can have 2 Underhanded Designs early in the draft, you can really start prioritizing cheap artifacts and maybe even stuff that bounces cards back to your hand. And in the worst case scenario, just really efficient removal, so that's a slam dunk.
You followed up this pack with a lot of different blue and black options, but again, I believe you veered towards the artifact theme here.
Yeah, I really struggled with this pick because Ether Hub is appealing to pair with my first one to have a splash option. Thriving Turtle, a nice defensive creature that I like a lot. Tezzeret's Ambition or Ether Tradewinds are like one of cards that sometimes would make my deck. And Subtle Strike is a card that I think is quite powerful, but again, only maybe want 1 copy in a control deck. The Pillar Bug, just bread and butter card, and I want as many artifacts as possible, so I took that.
And then here we see one of those rare Prophetic Prisms that no one seems to let go late.
My favorite card. I was so happy when I saw this.
Yeah, Prophetic Prism fits just all the themes of your deck: the splashing, the underhanded design, smoothing out your curve, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, you had the option of a relatively potent sideboard card in Ceremonious Rejection, and then a lot of kind of like marginal playable.
Yeah, I felt I wasn't really missing out on too much in this pack, and I decided to take Trandra's Power Helix because it's by far the strongest card in the pack, and maybe if I get like Unlicensed Disintegration, I would wind up splashing red, so just since I wasn't missing out on much, that's what I took.
Next pack, you have the aggressive 3-drop in Foundry Screecher, Subtle Strike, and then Ether Hub as I assume the main contenders here.
Yeah, those were 3 close options. And I sort of regret this pick a little bit. We'll see why later, but I decided that it was most important for me at this point in the draft that I lock up having 1 Subtle Strike. Really nice, cheap combat trick, a way to punish 1 toughness creatures, and just a card that I really like to have at least 1 of in every black deck.
Yeah. This pack, 2 competing 5-drops and then a 3-drop, all of which kind of play into the artifact theme.
Yeah, just 3 mana, 3/2 artifact creature is not exciting, but that's a card that might make my deck with the 2 Underhanded Designs.
Yep. And then we hop to pack 3 here, where unfortunately you don't open a mono blue rare, but you do get a Dovin Bond, which can maybe veer you back into Esper.
Yeah, given that I already had Prophetic Prism and Ether Hub, and my deck was mostly artifacts, I was pretty comfortable taking the Planeswalker as a splash here. It also goes great with the cards that can make a lot of servos, since sort of just sit behind a wall of creatures and make use of a Planeswalker. Also, just to mention, I got towards the end of pack 2 a second copy of Subtle Strike, so if I could go back in time, knowing that would wheel, maybe I would have made that pick differently.
Here we have Gearseeker Serpent, which does play well in decks with underhanded designs, but also a more defensive option in Consulate Skygate.
Yeah, so another example of where I'm picking a card that's definitely not the strongest card in the pack, just because it fits best with my deck. The Skygate, really cheap defensive artifact, is exactly what I want.
Here you end up with, again, a bunch of different black mid-range options that you're maybe not super excited about. A Weldfast Monitor, which provides a cheap artifact.
Yeah, I agonized over this pick as well. Arborback Stomper and Welding Sparks, super strong cards. But having gotten the Dovin Bond, I decided the ship had kind of sailed on splashing red, and there's no way I can use a double green card. So I took the really, really unexciting artifact creature over these great cards.
Third pick, Weldfast Monitor is not what dreams are made of.
No, certainly not.
And
here
we have a very good defensive option. Filigree Familiars really stands out as a card that plays quite well into the themes you've got going.
Right, I would have been happy with this with another Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot, but the Filigree Familiar is just great, perfect for an artifact-based control deck.
It's basically a better version of Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot.
Yes.
I assume you're pretty enthusiastic about this pick as well, just because it's a good defensive option and that can trigger underhanded designs.
Yes. So yeah, another artifact card here. I would have loved Whirler Virtuoso, but both already being 3 colors and not having energy, I had to pass on that card.
Yeah,
that I love so
you
much.
generally don't get to splash too many different things. Here we see another Foundry Screecher, Accomplished Automaton, which is maybe a nice way to fill out the end of the curve. Same with Ambition and Dukara Scavenger.
Yeah, so finally we get to a stage in the draft where I'm taking cards that are not super great fits for my defensive deck, but just on the raw power of the card, Foundry Screechers is always fine to...
Yeah, especially in your deck, it's just going to be a 3-1 almost every time. Here, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, another Prophetic Prism, you know, a great late pickup, but it looked like you might have been a little short on defense at this point, because I believe you took the Narnam Cobra.
Honestly, I'm surprised to see this pick on the screen. I don't know what happened here. I certainly don't remember that Prophetic Prism being in the pack.
All right. And then we've got multiple Terrors of the Fairgrounds in this pack, but Select for Inspection, a potential option, Ardar Express. Front, we're calling it certainly much too aggressive for your deck, and at least in the main deck.
At this point, my deck was a few late-game bomb rares and mostly vanilla artifact cheap creatures. So I figured having access to a card like Select for Inspection is nice to just have like one cheap trick in the deck. Not a stellar card, but I thought I might be able to make use of it either main deck or sideboard.
Yep. And then, so this pack 3, it got you a lot of what you needed. You didn't need another finisher, but Dovin Bond is actually a little cheaper than the others, and it gets you there. And then you've got some pretty good defensive options in Skygate, Filigree Familiar, and Weaponcraft Enthusiast. So, how do you think your deck ended up?
I think it's maybe a little above average, mostly on the strength of my rares and the 2 underhanded designs, but yeah, I like drafting the defensive Esper decks. I actually drafted a defensive Esper deck yesterday.
You drafted Esper both days, so...
I think this one's even a little better than my deck from yesterday.
Awesome. Good luck, Reid. For Reid Duke, Luis Scott Vargas here with the Draft Viewer.